everybody. I'm back. I just got off of Zoom and we had another great meditation. It's always so great to see those who have been participating, meet them in person. And I'm just about to introduce you to one of my favorite friends. Malikah is another writer, and she and I have been in a writing group, and she's been participating in my flow challenges over the last 4 years. And for those of you who are new here, this is a book that I wrote called Leap With Me. And Leap With Me is a book. It's a book of poems that I wrote during one of these 28-day flow challenges I've been leading. And what the 28-day flow challenges are is basically, hi Malika. I was just saying what the 28-day flow challenges are, which I know you've done a bunch of them. But I was just sharing that you just choose a joyful activity that you do every day for 28 days that you think gets you into, has a high chance of getting you into a flow state, which is that amazing experience we get when we're so engaged in what we're doing that we just, the rest of the world falls away.
Yes.
And I know that's something that you experience a lot as a writer.
Yes.
So do you want to just say hi to everybody and introduce yourself, and
Hi,
you can share about
everyone.
how we
So
met?
I'm Malika, Malika Wright. I am I'm an author, but I'm actually working on my first novel. I've written several articles for Black Love, their website on family relationships. I met Lori about, has it been like almost 3 years? Over three
I
years at this
think it
point?
was, yes, it was, I think it was like the fall after the pandemic started. So 3.5
Yes.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, so we met during the so we have a writers group that was formed maybe about like a few months before you actually joined. It was actually formed. Is it okay if I tell the story of how I met Cheryl and
I
how
would
we
love
brought
you
in?
to. Yeah, it's such a good story.
Yeah, so back in the summer of 2018, I went to the Brent Athen Writers Retreat. It was at a college over there, and it was so great. It was like a 4 day retreat, and I met someone there. Her name was Cheryl Lauer. Hopefully, she's watching this or can watch it later. And we just connected, and we spent a lot of time together. And we didn't know that we actually lived like 10 minutes apart, right? So we connected, like, oh, we're gonna hook up and do all this writing thing. It was full of energy, right? And then life happened, and we didn't talk. And then the pandemic hit. I actually lost my job. I was laid off, and I'm sitting at home, and my husband's like, "So when are you gonna get back into your writing?" I'm like, "Soon, eventually, like just." Because I kind of put it to the side, like, oh, that was nice to do, right? And then I was like, then I prayed on it, and I'm like, God, if you really want me to do this writing thing, like, I need to sign. Like, I was really upfront, little blunt. And then Cheryl came to mind. I'm like, she is not going to talk to me. It's been like almost 2 years. There is no way. Sure enough, I text her, and she was equally excited and was like, yeah, sure, let's meet up. I was like, all right, so let's do a Zoom thing, right? And then so she was like, well, I have my sister who's a good writer too. I'm like, well, I have a best friend named V who's a good writer too. So she was like, all right, let's do this. So we were actually meeting just like-minded individuals, just trying to like get our stuff out there. And Arlene, who's Cheryl's sister, could not stop talking about her cousin Lori. And I'm like, all right, let's meet Lori. She's like, she's written books, like she's great. I'm like, all right, all right. And then the first time I met you, I'm like, I couldn't help but smile and be happy because when you
Oh,
start talking, you have this light about you that you just kind of just bring this positive energy. Like you can't help but be in good, in a good mood. So we were doing that consistently like for months. And actually at the end of that year, I finished my first draft of my novel. Um, that really was a call to answer a question. I find that I write based off of either discomfort or out of curiosity. So whether it's the family relationships articles that I did for Black Love, just kind of navigating my role as a bonus mom, to my novel that I'm working on, where I'm trying to connect with my daughter. who's only 11 right now, but you already know how that goes. Before I hit the teenagers, I want to get this together so I can be prepared. But that's really what my current story is about, kind of connecting in this multi-generational um, lineage of women that's just trying to just get it together. So it's a work in process, but eventually I'll get there.
You
Eventually I'll
are
get there.
doing it. You're well, I am so inspired in our writing circle. We met every night, every Monday for
Yes,
really for a long time, every week.
yes.
Over a year, I
Mhm.
think, and we still do about once a month. And but I have been so impressed with you and your ability to set boundaries and be a good example to your kids as far as self-care. And
Yes.
sometimes during our calls, your kids would bop in and just your energy with them is so caring and so compassionate and so firm. And I just really respect that about you so much. And you've been a
Thank
good
you.
example to me because I think when I was, at your stage in parenthood, my kids are a little bit older. There's,
Hmm.
I'm not an empty nester yet or a
Hmm.
free bird, as they say, yet. I'm holding on tight, but they're much older than your kids. And
Yes.
so I just really admire your ability to prioritize your dream as a writer. And I also really, really respect your husband
Yes.
because he is the one that kind of every now and then says,
Like what's
what about your
going
dreams?
on?
What about
Yep.
your writing? So that's
And
fantastic. Um,
and fun story, like the only reason why I was able to actually finish my first draft was because of him. Because I was like, I'm gonna set a deadline of December 31st, 2020. And he was like, okay. So the week leading up to he's like, so where are you? I'm like, I'm getting. And it was to the point where I'm in the living room and the kids are in the kitchen and like he's sitting on the couch right next to me, like kind of like a bodyguard. Like, so the kids are coming, they're like, Mom, he's like, mm-mm. What can I help you with? And I'm peeking over because I'm in mom mode, right? I'm always like, wait, what do you need? What do you need? And he's like, nope, I got this. You continue. And I was able to finish that. So if you're watching, babe, thank you. Thank you
oh,
so much for your support. I
that's
appreciate
so
that.
great. I
Yeah.
love it.
Thank you.
So the book, my book has 7 touchstones of creativity,
Yes.
and the second one is process,
Yes.
meaning how I believe that we each have our own unique process, our own
Mm-hmm.
way of getting into flow. And so while there are certain tips, we focus on something we love is a great way, but everybody intuitively knows how to get into that, strike that chord within of creativity and flow.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the challenge is figuring it out for ourselves, right? Like
Yes.
through practice and trial and error and not having to be perfect and all of those things that we talk
Mm-hmm.
about in our writing group as well as our work. And so, what have you learned
Cool.
along the way about yourself? Like, what works for you because something that comes up a lot in these groups and these challenges is we don't do it consistently every day sometimes,
Oh.
right? Like, that's why I always say, just lower the bar and have your what is success for you in whatever your flow activity or your little leap that you're going to do every day. Have it be really low, and then if you exceed it, great,
Mm-hmm.
but it just helps to boost our confidence, right? But we all have to figure it out for ourselves. So what have you learned about yourself that helps you get back on the wagon, get back on the horse when you're falling off, and what keeps you creative?
That's a great question. So I went through different phases. I've gone to like having coffee in the morning with my husband, quiet time, to reading affirmations daily, to reading just writing just to write. But I've noticed that my creativity works best when I am in a decluttered space or if I'm cleaning. For some reason, cleaning does it for me. It could be something as simple as, cleaning off my desk or mopping the floors or something like that to where I can look at it and it's clear and it's fresh and it does something for me. I really don't know why, but for me, I would say cleaning helps me to clear my thoughts. And when my thoughts are clear, I can be as creative as possible. And creativity is not just to me writing a story. It could be in my finances when I'm having my weekly meetings with my husband, right? Like it's just a different feel. So I'm gonna say currently in the past few months it's been cleaning for me.
All right, I love that. that.
Thank you.
It's so real, right? Like that's so true. You know, sometimes I give myself a challenge with a writing project and then I
Yeah,
go scrub the shower or scrub the tubs or, you know, just like and think about it as I'm sort of in flow doing a daily, you know, an everyday housekeeping task. So I definitely,
exactly.
but I love what you said about a clear space before
Yes.
you sit down to write. And then, you know, I would love it if you would share that story. This is one of my favorite stories because I think that when we get into flow and we show up for ourselves a little bit every day or however that looks, and I think you are such a good role model as far as that commitment to your creative project and your creative self and how your whole family has become part of that.
Yes.
That's why I really wanted to talk to you about process. But I would love it if you would share that story of how you had that challenge with dialogue
Uh-huh.
in your book and sort of how you got through it. So do you mind sharing that?
No, I don't mind at all. So I got to a point where I wanted to talk about a scene that was really important in the book. I'm not going to give it away, but it was a scene that, like, I really had to put a lot of thought into it. And for some reason, it came to me in the middle of the night. Literally, I was sleeping, and it felt like a movie turned on. And I'm watching my characters come to life. They're talking. I mean, their mannerisms, like everything was on point. And I literally woke up out of my sleep and I wrote it down. And I remember sharing it with you guys during the meeting, and you guys are cracking up. But that's how I was in my dream. Like it was so funny. And these characters, that's why I need to get back to it because these characters are so relatable, and has a lot of my humor too into it. So like it's just cool, and it did a lot for me. So when I have moments like that, when it comes to me in the middle of the night, I know it's not just me. I know that it's something higher that wants me to express this or who wants me to share this story. So that's why I think it's taking me a little bit longer too, because I'm like, I got to get this right. I don't want to put any junk out. Like I need my characters to be on point. I need everything to be relatable so that it can resonate with just anybody. Like my target audience, of course, are going to be women and young girls and whatnot. But I wanted to just resonate across cultures, across generations, because really it's a common theme, right? You trying to find a way to speak to your daughter so that you don't have her repeat the same mistakes that you did. And then sometimes that information is not passed down, so you're missing stuff from the generation before. So I'm trying to find a way to connect all three. So I would love to have more moments like that where it comes to me and it's comical, but it's still targeted, like it's on point, right? So can't
Yeah, well,
tell it all without
I still, Malika, I still remember that scene vividly. Like
yeah.
there is something so powerful when we write in flow. It's like, I
Yes.
mean, that's the cool thing. The cool thing about flow is once we start to look through the lens of this flow state or
Yes.
this creative flow, we start to not just notice it in ourselves and figure out what works and what doesn't, but we start to recognize it in other people too. And
Yes.
there is some, I mean, I can read like a lot of this book that I wrote was written in flow, but some of it wasn't, you
Mhm.
know, like some of the connective tissue from one thought to the next was during the editing process with the editing brain. And I can recognize it in my own work, what was written in flow and what wasn't. And often when
Yes.
I send out my weekly newsletter, I'll get feedback from people and often they'll say, oh, that really resonated, or, you know, I get those comments
Yep.
on the ones that I wrote in flow or the ones that
Yep.
I was like not planning to write about that topic. And then intuitively, I was just like, you know what? This is on my mind, you know? And
Yeah.
so that happened when you read that scene.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think it's so cool that, you know, you can see it a mile
Yeah.
away, the art, you know, or when people are performing and they're in flow versus not, we can recognize it. And so it's just so exciting to witness, you know, I just
Yeah. And
love.
it's effortless too. Like it's when you're writing in flow, it just comes. It's not like, oh, let me write it this way so it can sound cool. Like no, it just comes out the way it's supposed to. I feel like when you're not writing in flow, it's a little bit forced, right? And you can read back and like, oh yeah, I was pushing it there, right? So it's it's more important to recognize what gets you into flow, and it's okay to stop. when you find yourself drifting, it's okay to stop and put the pen down, close the computer or whatever, because you want it to be consistent. You want your voice, you want that flow to just be consistent from start to finish. And sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. But I think that's really important to recognize yourself and have self-awareness too.
Mm-hmm. I know you said that you're editing now,
Mhm.
and we've talked a little bit about there being like those two parts of ourselves, right?
Yes,
The two parts of the brain, and there we really do switch what parts of our brain we're using when we're doing each
yes.
activity. But the beautiful thing about flow is that our prefrontal cortex quiets, which is the part of ourselves that focuses on, it's more an executive function. It's more that
Hmm.
it does a lot of good, but it tends to be the judge,
Yes.
right? Like this goes first, that goes second. And so when that's quiet, the inner critic quiets too. But when we get into editing and proofreading and that part of our brain, it tends to kind of awaken that inner critic a little bit
Oh my
again, because
gosh.
that
Yes.
inner critic is good at editing, right? And finding the little things that are wrong. But how's that going, and how are you navigating that?
Okay, so I finished my first draft at the end of 2020, right? I even sent it out to like a few beta readers and got feedback. I cleaned it up and I sent it to a professional editor. I got that feedback back and I sat it down for months because I'm like, oh my God, like this is just too much. But it wasn't like it was bad. It was constructive. I'm like, this is a lot of work. When I started, it was so much fun, right? Just having this off the top of my head, let's let it go. I didn't really care how things kind of connected. It was just a good story, right? But I'm like, oh gosh. So then I picked it back up, put it back down, picked it back up, put it back down. Because I found that like, when it came to editing, it became like work. It was heavy, like really, really heavy. And I'm like, it's not fun anymore. Like that whole waking up in the middle of the night, like that was not happening. It was more stress. Like, oh my God, like the pressure to actually not be perfect, but produce good quality content. Like that was top of mind. So I put it down. And then actually back in, I would say November, I read it again from a reader's perspective and made notes as if I was judging myself. I was tough on myself. Like, oh no, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how can you? Because I had to disconnect myself from my work, right? I wasn't judging myself. I wasn't judging myself. I was judging the quality of the work as if somebody else would do it. So let me get to it first. Let me chop it up first before someone else has a chance to come and do it. So then I'm in a process right now of comparing my notes to the editor's notes and then making those changes. And that's really difficult.
Yeah. That's great, though. I just admire you so much because that is important too, right?
Yes.
Like that,
Hmm.
and that's feedback. I mean, feedback is an important part of flow where we listen to the feedback we receive, and that's
Yes.
sort of the challenge. When we are sometimes we just flow right and it's just coming, but even when we're in that state, we are receiving feedback from the perspective of how we feel within, like what
Yes.
you're saying. Sometimes we just know that the flow session is done and it's just ended naturally and beautifully. And so
Yes.
that's what I mean by like listening to our feedback. But this is another form of feedback, right? You're
Hmm.
like you're really going to the next level of being as open as you can to another person's feedback, and then also as open as you can to the reader's feedback, but
Yes.
the reader is you.
Yes.
So, you're taking on a different persona really as you're reading your work. So
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a courageous, that is a leap itself. It's a
It is.
courageous process.
Yes.
And yeah, the next Instagram live that I'm doing is with Noreen,
Mm.
and she is an educator and has a three-step process for working with emotional blocks. But a lot of what we're
Mm.
talking about is sort of segueing into that touchstone, which is, our process as we figure out our process, which is everything that you've been talking about, which
Hmm.
is touchstone number two. As we're in the weeds and we're figuring it out, whether it's a clear desk, like you said, that helps you, get into creative flow, or whether it's cleaning or whatever it is, we're bound to come up against blocks,
Yes.
right? Those times when we're not flowing, and we have to find our way through those. And so, so many of the ideas that you have are so authentic, and I think we can all resonate with them. And also I just love that you're so real about the struggle too,
Yes.
because
Mm-hmm.
that's such an important piece of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Struggle, figuring out what happens when we come up against our struggles. And as you mentioned, some of them are
Yeah.
emotional, and some of them, like I remember when you got that feedback from the editor, it was a lot, right? And I
Yes.
remember you saying, what I respect so much about you is you have such self-knowledge, and you're so good with boundaries. And you were like, that was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good feedback. It was useful. I'm glad I hired a professional
Yeah.
editor, and I need to take a break and just comfort myself, and then pick that up when I'm ready, because
Yep.
that was a lot. And
Exactly.
so you didn't reject it. But you did a lot of that self-care that Noreen's
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about in the next one. But I think that you give us all such a gift by communicating your process.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, thank you for joining me. I feel
No
so blessed
problem.
that our paths cross synchronistically, and that we are
Absolutely.
lives, because I've learned so much from you. So yeah, well, thank you for joining me. I'm going to go now to Zoom
Okay.
at the top of the hour for another
Oh,
meditation.
nice.
And so, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Malikah.
Thank
And
you,
talk
Lori. I
to you
appreciate
soon.
you. All right.
Yeah, you
Bye.
too. Okay, bye.